Well, thank you very much for joining us again this week as we continue in our series called Treasured. We're working through these summer months and what it would look like as we continued in this series. I thought it would be a good idea that we would go along with the kids this summer. And as you can see, the decorations are beginning to pile up, and there's been a lot of time spent on what VBS will look like for the kids, and it's going on stage around the building, and I know they're working into the late hours of the night trying to get the studies together so that we can provide a great experience for every kid that walks through our doors this year, to let them know that they are treasured in the eyes of God, that they have worth in His eyes, and that there's a God that knows them. And as we move through this series, we're going to look at those themes together as well, because what's good for the kids also applies to us in our own lives, that we have value in the eyes of God, that we might not always see it, but we have worth, that we are treasured by a God, by the God. And for some, I think that's a hard concept. It's a hard concept to recognize within ourselves. Our own self-talk has convinced us that we are not worth it sometimes, that there are others who need it more, or that we are completely undeserving of it. And on the other hand, there's some who have been just pushed to the side. Some have been pushed to the side by the church, told that they don't belong with us, that they don't just fit in this mold that we've concocted. And we go through life carrying those doubts, carrying those things that people have said to us, that rejection or that fractured relationship. We carry it along so much that we begin to believe that we don't have any value in life. I don't need you to raise your hands or jump up and down saying that's you. I can only speak for myself, that there have been times in my own life where I've questioned my own worth, where I've struggled to believe that anybody cares about what I need or what I want or where I need to go. And even worse than that, feeling that I am just unheard in this world. Have you ever felt that way? Throughout your lifetime, have you ever felt unheard? That no matter what you say, it's just not being received on the other end. Whether that be a spouse or a close friend or a coworker. But you've been engaged in some conversation where you're trying to express your point of view, trying to express how you feel. And it just seems to fall on deaf ears. And no matter what you say, the words are not making a difference. The person is already ready their retort to you before you ever finish speaking. Or worse, they're just waiting for you to stop speaking to finally say what they wanted to say in the first place. And you would have had better luck in this point to just talk to a wall. You probably would have gotten a better response, right? Like all the arguing and all the talking really did nothing because you weren't being heard anyway. I remember a time not too far ago that I became very passionate on how to move an organization forward. And some in the organization just didn't want that to happen. They didn't want the change. They were very happy to just keep things the way that they have always been. And the more I tried, the harder it became. And it came to a conversation between myself and one of the executives of the leadership. And I would lay out my perspective, and no matter what I said, it just wasn't received on the other end. And the more this went on, the less I heard of what they were trying to say to me. So by the end of the conversation, neither side heard anything that the other one was saying, and we all left frustrated and unheard. And if you felt that way somewhere in your life, or maybe you're feeling it right now, then this morning is for you. And as we dive into an idea, it may help us feel less alone on our journey in our lives. And this morning I want to revisit a familiar story to many, but I want to look at it from a different angle this morning. We're going to spend a little bit more time inside the life and the ministry of Jesus and the woman who was bleeding for 12 years. Most messages around this topic revolve around the woman and her faith and her journey and the consistency, the incredible path that her life took. But in this interaction, there were two people involved. And this morning, I want to look at the other side. I want to look at the other person in the story and see what we can glean from that story. So we're going to pick up the story in Luke's account in chapter 8. And Luke set out to write an account of Jesus' life and ministry in what he called an orderly fashion. And throughout the account, we see Jesus' progression in ministry, and we see him set his eyes on this final destination towards the cross. But along the way, more and more people begin to flock to him in his ministry. People are looking for healing, to be known by him, to be seen by him, to learn from him. Sometimes just to actually be heard for the first time. And this is where we pick up our story. Jesus has been healing and teaching throughout the villages in this area. And as we move in here, it attracted more and more people. And so we pick up chapter 8 and verse 42. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." It's an amazing story of healing inside of this young woman's life. To be freed of what she had been experiencing was incredible. And you could stop right there in the story and you could have message after message after message just on that topic alone. But there's another angle to look at all of this. She was forgotten by society. She was pushed to the outside. And even within this story, she is standing on the outside of the crowd. No one listened. No one heard. Except one. Jesus' ministry was on the move here. He was super busy, and people were everywhere. And Luke, within this story alone, says the crowd was in there to crush him. They were crushing in on him. That's how many people were trying to follow Jesus in this moment. He's actually on his way to another's house to help in this story. But when the woman steps into the picture and grabs his cloak from behind, he knew it the minute it happened and stops. He knew it the minute it happened and stops, turned around and asked, "Who touched me?" He had been aware of something that happened with an intimacy that this woman hadn't felt in 12 years. For the first time in 12 years, she was being seen. She was being heard. And the person that heard her is the same one who hears us this morning. And if we can pull from her story just a few truths, I think we can walk away from this morning maybe feeling a little bit more heard in our own lives. One truth for us this morning is that we can be secured in his intimate awareness of us. We can be secured in his intimate awareness of who we are. You see, Jesus was moving along the path, crowds crushing in on him, but he had an acute awareness of a healing event that happened at that moment. He felt it the moment it happened and just stopped where he was to find out who did it. It reminds me of a parent with a little child. And if you've ever taken care of babies for a while or children for a while, you begin to notice every whine and every whimper and every cry sounds different. Was it a hungry cry? Was it a sleepy cry? And you're able to distinguish everything from happy to sad. Or in the middle of the night, when a parent just hears the slightest sighs and perks up in the middle of the night, say, "What's wrong?" You can tell, and you have this acute awareness of what's going on inside the life of a little child. In the same way, God hears our own sighs as if they were loud cries. As his children, his ears are acutely attuned to our voice, to the cry of our heart, to every plea of desperation, to every ache, to every pain, to every sadness. His ears are attuned to us. Last week we spent some time inside the life of David, that he was known by God as we are known by God. And the more you dive into David's life, you could see the very thing that we are talking about this morning, that God is attuned to his cry. And when David was on the run for his life, and he was desperate, he cried out to God and wrote these words, "Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call to you because you answer me." There was an intimacy between David and his Creator. There was an intimacy between David and God, that God heard him in his distress. There's also an intimacy between this woman and Jesus Christ, that Jesus would stop his busy schedule and get down to her level to hear what she's going through. And there's an intimacy between us and the Holy Spirit this morning. That whatever our circumstance, whatever we are going through, whatever it might be, he will hear us. He has time for us, and he isn't too busy to hear what we need to say and to pick up whatever we lay at his feet this morning. We no longer have to feel alone in the world, pushed to the side and unheard. We can be secure that he is intimately aware and that we are intimately known by a Savior, that he will hear us when we cry out to him. Unfortunately for some, they've just stopped asking. They've been worn down by whatever it is, or they feel like they don't deserve the healing to come. And so we've just stopped crying out to God. We believe that we won't be heard anymore. And so when it comes to that, you have not, because you ask not. We can see the same thing in young children, right? Especially the ones that are coming into their own abilities in life and they can do it all by themselves. Right? And so you let them try. And you watch them struggle. And you watch them struggle because, right, they can do it all by themselves. And you want to jump in, but you want to see how this plays out. And you have this little mixture of admiration at their determination to do it and a little bit of sadness because you want to jump in and fix it for them, but you can't. And then when they get to the end to find something that's too hard to do, they just give up. And you look at them, and if you're anything like me, you just say, well, why didn't you just ask for help? I would have helped you. But isn't that our own story sometimes? That we drive forward and we push forward because guess what? I can do it all by myself. I'm better on my own, and I don't need anybody else's help. And when it gets too hard, we just give up because we can't do it. And if the woman in our story today gave up, she would have never experienced the healing when she finally got to Jesus. And it's that same Jesus who said earlier in that book, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened." There are times in our lives that we feel unheard because we just don't speak up, that we don't say anything. We've convinced ourselves that we aren't worth it, and so we just keep quiet inside. But Jesus is clear here. Sometimes we just need to ask, to seek his face, and we will find him. He's going to be right at that door, ready to open it up for us, to hear the cry of our hearts and the plea of what's going on. But what if we have been asking? What if we have been asking time and again? Isn't he tired of hearing me complain about the same thing over and over again? That we've said it too many times? Answers aren't coming? And I truly believe that he's not tired of your prayers. In fact, I think he invites you to continue praying. I believe that we are called to the exact opposite of giving up in our prayer life. That we can't pray too many times over a subject. Let's look at that woman again this morning. She waited 12 years for relief. What if she stopped at 11? What if she stopped at 11 and a half? Or what if she stopped at the crowd because it was too hard to get to Jesus? It would have been the rest of her life just suffering. And there was Jesus. Because she was persistent and kept pushing and kept asking and kept wanting, Jesus was right there. I think we need to be just as persistent in our own prayer lives, in the cry of our heart, in the situations that feel like they've been going on forever. Don't stop. Paul tells us to pray unceasingly. It's not that every prayer is going to be answered in the way that we want it to, but we can't give up in the pursuit of God. We need to develop in our lives a persistence of this woman trying to reach Jesus. With the crowds pushing in around her, she found a way to get to even the bottom of his cloak with a persistence that I can only wish to have. We need to find that same determination in our own prayer journey, consistently and continually reaching toward the one who will actually hear us when we cry out. The last piece of this puzzle, and what I think we all need to realize, is that sometimes we just need to come closer. Jesus isn't keeping us at arm's length, trying to keep us away. When the woman tried to hide after she was healed, Jesus called her to come closer. Our prayer life, whether it's a cry for help or a shout for joy, draws us closer into relationship with Jesus Christ. The writer of Hebrews puts it this way: let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. We can have confidence to approach Jesus in prayer. Confidence that he will understand how we feel, and confidence that he cares about what I'm saying and what I'm going through. Confidence that he will hear us. I believe the woman was afraid when Jesus called out looking for her, afraid of what might happen to her in that moment. I don't think she expected Jesus to bring her in close, let her know that it was okay, that he heard her pain, and that she was free to go. According to the author of Hebrews, that's the meaning behind the throne of grace. Commentator William Johnson writes it this way, that the throne of grace tells us that here is the one who knows, feels, and cares with us in our struggles. His throne, it tells us, is not merely one of power. It's a throne of grace. Because of what he is, because of what he has been through, it will always be the throne of grace. Jesus Christ calls us closer to him, especially in those times where we feel unheard in life, where we're just not understood. He understands. He knows. He's been through all of it before and knows exactly where we are. He knows the hurt. He knows the pain. He knows every single cry of what I say. Max Lucado once wrote that our prayers may be awkward. Our attempts may be feeble. But since the power of prayer is in the one who hears it and not in the one who says it, our prayers make a difference. The power of prayer does not lie in us. It lies in the one who hears it. And the one who hears me and who hears us today. That whatever is going on, whatever the situation might be, whatever the struggle or the past hurt or whatever the consequence or the thing is now, he still hears what we're going through. And the power of our prayer is not in me and it's not in you, but it's in him. The one who hears every cry and every plea and every frustration and every shout for joy. He is intimately aware of what we are going through each and every day. And he stops. He stopped for the woman. And he stops for you today to see your pain. He stops for you to hear the cry of your heart. He calls us to ask, to seek His face, to be persistent in our prayers, constantly and continuously reaching out to Him so that we can draw into a closer relationship with the one who hears us when we call, whose ears are attuned to what we're going through, that every sigh is a loud cry. And even though the world may not, God hears you. And He hears you this morning. Would you pray with me? Lord God, I'm just thankful that You have ears that hear me, that hear all of us this morning, that You are attuned to the cry of our hearts. That whatever thing has brought us here, whatever thing continues to weigh on who we are, whether the world doesn't see us, if the world doesn't understand, I know with confidence that You do. And I need You every hour, God. We give You the rest of our time together. It's in Your name. Amen.